Yeah, I. This has been a very weird week. I
Yeah.
like. I mean, I guess we'll talk about Sylvanas more later, but I did not think that the like 4 minute long Sylvanas Phase One was going to go live as a 4 minute long Phase One.
Well, it's apparently intentional because they increased the berserk timer, right? On
Best part
normal
is
and
I don't even know if that does anything. Like I guess it does things if you're taking a long time in Phase One and Phase Two.
right.
Which like Phase Two is like almost fixed duration, but you can take a long time to push your HP. Basically, that's the only time
Yeah.
that's not fixed duration or you wipe. Um, but Phase Three is the only part where the timer feels like it matters,
Right. Yeah.
and that doesn't actually adjust Phase Three at all.
No, I say I'm wondering if they just did it to like so you. Well, I mean, I want like the berserk timer in general. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know.
Yeah, like if you were hitting the Berserk timer before, I don't know how you were making the DPS check in Phase Three.
Right. Yeah. You weren't. Right. Like you were dying at
Yeah,
like at that point. So, but yeah, it's so funny.
I
It
mean,
just it just confirms it was supposed to be a long fight, which is just like ugh, gross.
yeah, I like this is really weird coming off of Denathrius, right? Where Denathrius was like so perfectly tuned and just an all around excellent fight.
Yeah, I'm trying to like I think the issue is, and I guess we could probably talk about this actually on the podcast. But I think the issue is they're just trying to use the lore characters too much, right?
I think
Like
that's part of
that,
it.
like they had like this story beat they needed to hit, and they tried to not jam it into a fight, but they built fight mechanics around utilizing like the other people around you, like the lore characters, right? To
Yeah,
build you bridges in phase two, like that's where phase two comes from.
yeah,
And they're trying to tell a story. They're trying to tell a story of like you were in whatever Sanctum of Domination and whatever it's called, Torghast, and now you've portaled yourself over and you're trying to run into Oribos to stop the jailer from taking the Arbiter stuff in Oribos, which on paper seems great, but like like even Jaina's transition phase was better than this, right? And that transition phase was god awful. Like the fucking you can't see and the tornadoes bad. It was just bad.
yeah.
It was annoying. It was bad. It was just ugh. And so now you have this, which is it's not hard, it's just boring. Like it's
Is
just
long and tedious. That's the
yeah,
same thing I think actually. So Phase One I think is really bad in part because there's nothing going on.
yeah, it's just long and tedious. Yeah,
It's just long. You like don't stand in the swirlies and you kill chains.
yeah. Phase three though, actually cool.
Phase three is cool. I would really
Yeah,
like it if phase one were like a minute long, and phase two were like 2 or 3 minutes long, and then phase three were just more of the fight, basically. Like
yeah,
they could actually leave phase three exactly as long as it is right now, and just have it be a 10 minute fight instead of a 15 minute fight.
yeah, and be perfectly fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That is true.
Yep.
Oh, oh man,
All right, but we should probably get this podcast officially started.
I got it. Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good.
Um, I'm going to do the intro in three, two. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 75. I had to check my notes. 75 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I am one of your hosts, emallson, and as always, I am joined by my co host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, we are going to be talking a lot about the hotfixes and the implications of those hotfixes that have been happening this week, as well
Yeah.
as a little bit about the raid. Obviously, only heroic and normal are out this week, so we still haven't seen mythic. But I think there are a couple of interesting tidbits from this reset that we have to talk about.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I think before we jump into that, we'll talk a little bit about some stuff that happened maybe outside of the hot fixes and outside of the raid this
Right.
week because we did have a couple of things that happened. And one really big thing. So Blizzard earlier this week released their format for the new MDI or the Mythic Dungeon International Tournament. basically releasing a brand new format, which for season two, which I'm really excited about. So to break it down, what they're doing is essentially they're going to do open time trials, and basically the top 20. So open time trials for all regions but China, and the top 24 teams from those open time trials get split into three groups of eight, and those three groups then compete. Basically in consecutive weeks. Group one goes week one, group two goes week two, and the top two teams from those groups go to the global finals. And then they'll have one team from China that goes, so that'll be your seven teams. And then finally, they'll do a last stand tournament, which is basically everybody from that didn't make it through groups gets one last chance to basically qualify for global finals. One more team there, and then the global finals will be eight teams.
I love
Um,
that they're building a redemption arc into the tournament structure.
so, to be fair, I actually really like it. I think it's a cool idea. They did mention
Yeah,
this last stand part of the tournament is going to be very similar to like the Great Push, where it's basically like maybe one day of like 5 to 6 hours
right.
worth of dungeons. Best team wins out of that, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I think this format. A couple people tweeted about it. This format, I think, is generally probably going to be much better, both from a spectator perspective and a player perspective, in terms of like time commitments, and then being able to see different teams play the game, right? Like I think as someone who's not going to compete in this, like I'll basically from my point of view being selfish from a spectator, from like being a spectator, it's like it kind of gets boring when it's Echo. I forget the other team. Um, there's like watching like basically the
The
same
same
three
three
teams,
teams, yeah.
yeah, basically compete for like each week, and so I think seeing new teams, I think will be interesting, will be cool, and the fact that we'll get like new faces out there, right?
Yeah.
And then from like the team side of the perspective, right? They basically have 2 weeks they have to really push, right? You have time trial week, make sure you make the top 24,
Yeah.
and then you have like your actual group stage, right?
I do like that this addresses, so this keeps something that I think Blizzard wanted, which is like consistent events. Like every couple weeks there's going to be an event, or every weekend even there's going to be an event for a while.
Hmm.
But also not requiring the same teams to be prepping for
Show up.
every single weekend. So the teams only have to do, like, you have to do your time trials, and then you have to do your group event, and you if you make it to finals, you get finals. So there's like 3 weekends basically that you have to be doing this, or if you're
Right.
doing the last stand as well, which is a lot more lenient than like every weekend there's another group stage.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So this will be pretty fun. I think this will be actually pretty good in terms of like a structure. Um, in terms of the actual like doing the dungeons part of it, I don't like that's I don't know. Like the Great Push was cool because it was like showing people go as high as they can, and it was sort of there was a lot of drama there. Hopefully, there's
Yeah.
more drama here, just in terms of like not like you'll of course see like Echo, of course, winning their group. Perplexed, I think was the other team out of EU winning their group, right? So there'll be probably a couple teams, depending on what group they're in. You'll probably slot them in as like, hey, they're the favorite, the number one. But it'll be interesting to see how like the number two slots break out, and then this last stand tournament has sort of some um some potential to be like just interesting, to watch. So yeah, it'll be hopefully cool. Hopefully cool at the end of the day. All right, so I think we had stopped with pretty much gone through season two, right? MDI stuff. I don't know if you had anything else
Yes.
to comment on there.
Not really.
Okay.
Other than that, I am glad to see that they are going to be doing a great push like thing with the last stand stuff.
Yes.
That's gonna be that's gonna be cool.
Yes. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of the tournament. Generally, I think be cooler for everybody involved. So that'll be fun. All right. So the next couple topics we'll probably hit quickly because I do want to get through some of the actual big things, or at least the things that happened this week.
We
So
are now running behind by a
yeah,
lot.
somehow running behind. So the first next sort of thing that happened this week was they removed. Well, they first increased the catalog research cap, and then effectively removed it in a later hotfix. So catalog research is of course the new currency you get from turning in like items or relics to the archivist, and it's sort of like the one of the two new reps in Korthia. Basically, when you hit the cap, you can no longer turn in items, which meant you can no longer increase your rep. So Blizzard, I think with the Tuesday hotfixes, like tripled it or quadrupled the cap, and then later on the same week, just basically removed the currency cap, which
Yeah.
again, like the currency tied to a rep gain. If you don't spend the currency, you can't gain the rep. It just seems like an oversight, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was possible. You could very easily get to tier 3 without hitting the currency cap because I did,
Mhm.
and I was not min maxing that rep. Um, and if you did that, then you could start buying like personal use keys to get into the rift. Um, and those are like single use, so those are actually consumable, and there is a way for you to spend that currency. But there are a couple of reports like of people basically losing part of their rep because they did the like turn in all of my items and then all of the items getting consumed, or like, you have a 500 uh item, and then
Gotcha.
that 500 item gets you 300 rep because you only consumed 300, you only had room for 300 of the item in your currency tab.
Yeah.
So very awkward there.
Yeah. Together, yeah. Yes.
Speaking of awkward currencies,
the the Soul Cinders one's what is next, right? Where
yeah.
apparently if you did Torghast at the opening, you essentially are missing out on 20 Soul Cinders. Because Blizzard hotfixed in uh the change. So they did.
Apparently, they hotfixed it in, and then they had to hotfix it again because initially it was just like the tooltip got updated, but it didn't actually grant anymore.
Mhm,
And now it actually grants the correct amount.
yeah. So
So
in any event, again, they're 20 off from a currency perspective. So
at the very
um
least, there are a lot of Soul Cinders missions on the mission table. So it's very easy to make up that gap if you've been doing missions throughout 9.0.
right,
Um,
right.
So that's not a big deal. Side note, venture plan no longer being updated. Look for a fork. Or a couple floating around that have the new 9.1 missions supported. Uh, if you don't use a new one, I learned this the hard way. The venture plan will tell you that you are guaranteed to succeed at the Soul Cinders mission, and then you will fail.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, so keep that in mind. But yeah, there's a slight missing. I don't think this ends up being a big deal in the grand scheme of things. So I don't think you were off by 20 in terms of like getting your
No,
rank 5 and sync 6
no.
at the
People are
current time
making it
though.
out like it was a big deal. It is kind of funny. I think it's mostly just funny,
Yeah.
especially since Soul Cinder's missions are fairly free, unlike Soul Ash missions at the beginning of Shadowlands, where it
Right.
was like one a week and very, very difficult for most people to actually do, except Night Fae.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, so I wouldn't stress about that.
No, it's a funny little, yeah, it's very confusing as to what exactly they were doing. Um so yeah, so then the final sort of thing that happened this week was just some clarification on the hard mode for Tazavesh. Basically, Blizzard clarified that for the hard mode for Tazavesh, you do need to complete it in one single run. You
Yep,
can't sort of leave the instance, come back the next day. So yeah, just basically if you're gonna do Tazavesh hard mode,
do it in one sitting.
yeah, start it and complete it. I actually did it this week. It
Yep,
took us about 2 hours.
same.
However, an hour of that was spent trying to activate hard mode, not actually do the instance.
Yeah,
Because and
it's
I'll
really annoying. Yeah.
so here's what happened with us, which I find hilarious. So we and I'll just real quick about this. So the part that we got stuck on was the part where you have to open up the doors like the music boss.
Oh,
So what happened was we went into that area, and if you remember the area, it splits basically to two hallways, and they all kind of lead to the same spot. We
yeah.
ran in into the right, and our rogue immediately talked to the guy at the door, picked the wrong one. He was like, "I'm just going to select each one." I was like, "I don't think that's how it works, but okay." So he selected each one, and then we're like looking around, read online. We're like, "Oh, we have to talk to the guy who's right outside, and he'll give us like an item. We have to do a trading thing."
You gotta do the trading mini game.
Well, he never was active for us to talk to. So we thought that we messed up by talking to the other guy at the door earlier. So we ran out of the instance, reset the whole thing, went back through the whole like killing the first boss again, hitting the same spot where it messed up. And then I just got really upset and started running around in circles and realized you have to run down the left hallway to trigger an RP event that then makes the vendor talk like vendor activated, basically. And the first time in for 30 minutes, we spent basically like trying to get it to work and never walk to the left to trigger the
Oh my god.
the um the event. So yeah, so it was just like great.
That is really something.
Yeah. So if you're doing
Um,
hard mode, run down the left hand side of the market, trigger the RP.
yeah, I'm gonna be doing another hard mode run today. Probably on my paladin actually instead of my warrior. The more
Nice.
I think about it, the more likely it seems that I'm gonna be playing my paladin as my like second tank instead of my warrior.
Hmm.
Um, because there's a lot of fights this tier that you can almost one tank and you just need someone to taunt for debuffs. And I mean, you could just throw whatever Mad Kings, whatever it's called for Paladin, their legendary. Just go full damage build. Just go nuts.
True. That
Just
is
go
true.
nuts. Let your co tank actually do all the work.
That is true. But yeah, I mean, quick. I think we'll maybe spend a different episode talking about Tazavesh because I do want to talk
Yeah,
about it. I think it's fun. But
I think it's really, really interesting. But I also want to say on the note that you had to do hard mode in one sitting. That's consistent with how Mechagon worked.
that's true.
And Karazhan did not have a hard mode, but if you wanted to do the like this is not super relevant, but for Karazhan, in order to unlock the extra boss, you of course had to do that in one go. But because it was a timed thing, that didn't matter because you only had like 15 minutes to do it in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, but that is consistent. Like I definitely ran into that with Mechagon, where we did the first like 5 bosses on hard mode, and then went back in and realized that it was not on hard mode anymore.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. No, I unfortunately actually, I think I only did hard mode Mechagon once. That was it. And we did it in one sitting, so I never really hit that. So, but cool. So that's really the big things that happen. Well, there's more things that have happened, but outside of some of the tuning stuff that we're going to talk about, those are really sort of I think the big items that we hit or that came out last week. So,
Yeah.
um, now in terms of I guess well the name of the episode, I think I named the episode. What did I name it? It was like patch 9.1.0.0.1.c or something like
Yeah, I
basically.
thought that was a little bit too. I went a little bit more on the nose for the stream title. It's every realm is a public test realm.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
But yeah, we got a lot of hot fixes this week. We got a lot of tuning this week.
Yeah,
We already talked about from last week the brawn tuning. I talked
right.
about that. Um, we actually got extra tuning before we get into the legendaries and stuff like that. Bonedust Brew got changed.
Did it? I was this the crit chain? What did it get changed to? Did I?
It no longer triggers on non-monk abilities.
Oh,
They did
okay.
this to fix the necrotic wake thing, where you could have Bone Dust Brew trigger off of a weapon and also crit.
Gotcha.
And there
Okay,
were clips of people doing like 50% of a Marth's health with a single weapon on Tyrannical,
that's true. I remember that.
which is
Yeah.
probably not what they wanted, but nonetheless a very interesting interaction. I think this is a situation where the cure is worse than the disease because
Yeah.
it actually really really hurts Necrolord for Brewmaster because so I was incorrect initially. I thought it didn't work with Invoke Niuzao anymore. Invoke Niuzao still works, but it no longer affects trinkets, potions, procs, uh, and that just like that's 30% of a Brewmaster's damage right there easily. And it's going to be more once people start getting the new weapons and things like that with procs.
Mm,
Right now it's 30% of my damage, and I don't have a pox storm on.
yeah.
Um,
So does this mean it's not going to proc on any sort of damage off of like maybe a conduit or a soulbind ability, things like
right.
that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it doesn't work as far as I know, it doesn't work off of brawn. Well, I mean it can't work off of brawn, but it can't work off of pustules from Ameni or damage from Kevin, which is not a huge deal because the value of like Kevin is the 6% damage increase.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it actually has a noticeable downward impact on Brewmaster damage. I posted some sims from it on in the Brew Lounge earlier this week, which is not something I normally do, but because we had so many hot fixes, I hadn't gotten any of the guides on Peak updated yet with Soulbind information.
Yeah.
So I was just like, fuck it. Here's the chart. Have at it. I
Yeah.
can't. I can't.
Can't do this. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is like I have in Brewnounce right now that the choice between Kyrian and Necrolord right now is basically guesswork.
Gotcha.
Um, because like it had if they changed this Bone Dust Brew thing to work on basically if they just turn off the necrotic wake weapons basically, then what happens is that Necrolord becomes like the number 2 damage on single target by like a very small amount. It's like very close to Kyrian, except for this Bone Dust Brew change. Um, and without that, it is like 200 DPS behind on single target. But
Gotcha.
then on cleave, it's still very good. So it's like, I don't know, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like pick your poison.
play one of those two. If you're raiding, play one of those two.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's funny because like Mistweaver is very similar in a similar not based on this change, but in a similar position in terms of power around Kyrian and Necrolord. Where like Necrolord, if your raid stacks, if you can get good use of Bone Dust Brew, right, then it's potentially better than Kyrian. But the problem is with
Mhm.
Kyrian, like it's much more if your raid doesn't stack, it's if you're if you want a more consistent sort of ability, you go Kyrian. Or if you multi-spec. Anytime you say
Yeah.
you're not going to play anything other than Mistweaver, like the recommendation is Kyrian. But it's like so like what's the
I mean,
I
like,
hate that question. Like what's the
Moonwalker also
best?
wants Kyrian. So,
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, so that's what like our point is like, or at least in Mistweaver land, like our point is basically like if you play anything other than Mistweaver, right, and you want to be
you should
not
just
a
play Kyrian.
yeah, just play
Yeah.
Kyrian because it's not that wide a gap. So
Yeah. And um I guess one extra thing while I'm talking about Sims, if you look at Blood Mallet right now, Brewmaster has like crazy damage on there. I'm going to be talking with people sometime this week to get the reason it's so high for Brewmaster on Blood Mallet is that the damage done to the tank in the sim profile by default right now is like really, really high.
gotcha.
And it needs to be reduced a bit because it's overvaluing Dave. Um, so just needs to get toned down a little bit. So Brewmaster damage is not really competitive with protection paladins
Yeah,
outside of Dave Cheese, which is basically what the sim is doing right now on Blood Mallet is effectively cheesing Dave.
gotcha. Fair enough. Fair enough. All
It's
right. Any other
other
tuning stuff or
not for Monk.
okay. All right. Well, then let us talk about. I guess the big thing that
Oh,
came
I guess
out.
there kind of is, but the Covenant Legendary
Yeah,
tuning, right?
yeah, the Covenant Legendary tuning. So basically, real quick, or just as an overview, Blizzard tuned a bunch of legendaries with two of the monk specific Covenant ones in Necrolord and Venthyr. So for the
Yep.
Necrolord one, they basically increased its procs per minute from 1.25 to 1.5. So you get one extra every 4 minutes, at least proc, right? And then they increased the Venthyr Sinister Teachings, the cooldown reduction from 3 seconds to 5 seconds, which is actually a fairly substantial change. Um,
66% increase.
yeah, and also like yeah, with that change, it pushes. It's interesting. So we talked a little bit about this right at the start, but the Necrolord one, just real quick, isn't. I mean, the, the actual Covenant ability, or sorry, the legendary itself isn't that interesting. I don't think it's that good either. This proc rate doesn't materially move its positioning, right, in terms of like rankings. Like it's still. I'm not gonna say lackluster, but like there are better options. I think, at least for Mistweavers. I'm assuming very similar
You're talking
for
about the Necrolord
the
one?
Necrolord one now. Bounce Robo.
Um, yeah, so the interesting thing about that one is that it could be good, except that while Bone Dust Brew is active, you can't get a proc. So increasing the proc rate actually not as good as it sounds, because it just makes it more likely that it's going to just like have periods where it doesn't proc because it's already active.
That's
Which
fair.
that's ultimately the main problem with it is that like you so especially because so Brewmaster has twice as many Bone Dust Brews as the other two specs because of brew cooldown reduction. We have it basically on a 30-second cooldown instead of a minute cooldown. So we already have it up twice as much, and that eats into the proc rate even more. It's just like it's actually fairly close after this hotfix. Like you could play it instead of Storm Stouts if you wanted to, but
Gotcha.
Storm Stouts is fairly far behind Shard Passions at this point for Necrolord. So I really would just play Charred Passions if I were Necrolord.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, and I think for Mistweaver, like the biggest sort of issue for us is just with the random nature of the proc and the fact that it procs off anything. Like for us, we want to spread it to allies. So hitting an
Yeah,
ally that's like away from the group is a wasted proc in all intents and purposes. Doing damage and having it proc on a boss, particularly bosses with larger hitboxes, is wasted for us because no one stands in
yeah,
the center of the hitbox. So
yeah,
it's just a yeah, rocking it more, not huge, at least from our side. But yeah, I can see it for like a damage perspective. Can still be potentially stronger.
yeah.
Um,
So basically, if they made it so you could have two procs up at once, I think it would actually get a decent bit better.
gotcha.
Um, but as it stands, nah.
Fair enough. And
Oh, it
then
would also it would also require them to fix the thing where trinkets and stuff work with Bonedust Brew. If they fix that and you could get trinkets interacting with Bonedust Brew again,
gotcha,
then it goes up as well. But without that, no.
gotcha. That's fair. That's fair. Um, and then the Venthyr, so Sinister Teachings and that cooldown reduction going from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. Um, so if people don't know, this is the legendary where while you're Fallen Order, does two things. It adds an extra, I guess, adept or clone or whatever it is that comes out of the mirror when you cast Fallen
Yeah,
Order. And then as long as you have adepts active, any crits you do will reduce the cooldown of Fallen Order by 5 seconds. And it's got a, what is it, a 0.75 ICD on that. So you can't sort of proc it multiple times a second, basically once a second or so, once every three
yeah,
quarters of a second. And in terms of the actual power of the cooldown reduction, even conservatively, like critting every other second over the course of that like 25 to 30 seconds that your adepts are out, is like a minute cooldown reduction, right? Um, so it potentially can be strong. I think we talked a little bit about this at the start. Problem is that the actual ability is not that great, right?
yeah.
Like having more Fallen Order doesn't make casting Fallen Order more often that much better. Um,
Fallen Order just doesn't do like for Brewmaster, it doesn't do damage. Like it's
yeah,
actually the worst. So at least like in theory for Mistweaver it does some healing, and if everybody needs healing, then your all of your enveloping mists are going to get some value, and of course that's not very frequently the case that everyone needs healing equally, but at least like in theory it does a decent amount of healing. And for Windwalker, like the Tiger Adepts do a decent amount of damage. For Brewmaster, the Ox Adepts are actually just really bad Tiger Adepts, like really really bad. So what? Like in order for Fallen Order to be good for Brewmaster, they first need to change that, and nothing else that they do about Fallen Order can make it worthwhile. But it's actually also Venthyr as a whole just continues to fall way behind the other covenants for
yeah,
at least Brewmaster. There's no good damage soulbinds at all. All of them are extremely bad. Draven, very good defensively, but Fallen Order is worthless defensively. Like you're better off with um, either the Night Fae or the like Night Fae, Necrolord, and Kyrian all have other unique things that provide defensive power outside the Soulbinds
right.
that Necrolord or that Venthyr just doesn't, and Draven doesn't make up for that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That makes perfect sense. I think from like the like what am I trying to say? Like the inquisitive side of me wants to switch to Venthyr and try this out on my Mistweaver just to see what it looks like. Because like there's a part of me that thinks this could be good, but
Do
at
it
the
on
same
farm.
yeah, I mean, at the same time, it'll probably be like a farm thing.
My the brewmaster in the weekday team in my guild switched to Venthyr on farm to farm renown on it,
Yeah,
and got a kill on Denathrius with Fallen Order. Pretty sure. I think they did Venthyr. I know they did around like they did everything, all the other covenants. I don't know if they actually did Venthyr because of how bad it is, but I think they did.
yeah, yeah. But there's a part of me that probably ends up swapping on farm for just to test this out because I think it'd be cool if this was just stronger. But yeah, head AI always a little bit of a suspect thing to rely on.
Yeah.
Um, so cool. So those are the two, I guess, legendary tuning things. I think
Yeah, more broadly, there's the legendary tuning as it impacted other classes, and they we're quick to peel back on the nerfs to some other Covenant legendaries, like the Warrior one that basically killed Venthyr very briefly. They the next day put out another message saying actually that hotfix is not happening for Warriors, so they can stay Venthyr.
Yeah.
Um, but I wanted to mention as well that like because of how these legendaries are tied to the covenants, doing this tuning means they're tuning the covenants, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you have to take all that into account because yeah, these legendaries don't they affect the actual covenant ability, right? So in essence, yeah, you're right.
Right.
Yeah, tuning that covenant, the form of tuning.
Yeah, and there are some big changes in this. Like, the DK Night Fae legendary went from a 1% increase to strength for they get stacks of something while they were in their blue D&D to a 2% increase. So they literally doubled that part of the effect. Like, there's other effects tacked onto it. So it's not like literally doubling the strength of the legendary, but it's a very large buff to the legendary. So
Gotcha.
there's some very big changes. Like Brewmaster actually or Monk has some of the smaller changes
Yeah.
um to the legendaries. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it'll be interesting to see if they make anything else. I feel like hopefully they're done going into Mythic Week and they give us a couple weeks of just sort of a game that's sort of locked down. But yeah, I mean the whole most of this or a lot of this stuff came out like on 5 p.m. on a Friday, which is just
Yeah.
like getting in right at the end, right at the end. So
Yep.
um
Yep. Speaking of stable systems going into Mythic Week, we are going to be getting changes to the Shards of Domination system. As it stands right now, the set bonuses that you get, which at least for Brewmaster, I don't know about other specs, but at least for Brewmaster, the only relevant part of Shard of Domination is the set bonus. Um, the Unholy and the Blood set bonuses are so good that you will equip literally anything to
it's a
get one of those set bonuses. Um, they're making it so that those are going to scale up with the level of your shards, with the level of your individual gems. Currently, they do so they are fixed as soon as you get any 3 blood gems equipped, for example, along with the chest piece for the set bonus, you get your blood link set bonus, and it's just like great. And it never changes. Like if you got that this week, great, that's as good as it's going to be. They're making a change. We don't know any of the details of it. Um, but apparently, if you upgrade all 3 of your blood gems, then that's going to increase the blood link damage. Similarly, with the Unholy set and the Frost set, so that those are going to grow in power over the course of the tier. But we have no information about what the scaling is going to be like or how impactful it's going to be.
yeah. I mean, this just seems like something that I mean, it's cool, great idea, but like it doesn't. I feel like this should have been. Why was this not like a part of the initial discussions? Like, what?
I
Who at
actually ran
Blizzard?
into I've answered we've had a bunch of people in brew questions asking like wasn't this already the case? Like no
Yeah,
it
no,
wasn't.
uh,
Everybody assumed it would be.
yeah, and that's my thing. Is like I knew like the goal would be to get your 3 of whatever set you wanted, and then slowly increase your gems. Like the actual upgrading of gems was so secondary in this system, right?
Yeah.
Like because the gems are to your point, they're not impactful, right? In terms
Yeah.
of like what they bring. So it's just like yeah, I don't know. I'm not like it's awesome that they're doing this, but this is like another one of those items where you're just like, why was this not a part of the original system? Like, like why was this not like part of what would happen just originally? Like, hey, getting 3 gems early on, after going through RNG hell to get them, and then equipping them and just having the set bonus and be the same set bonus for the entire tier, like why upgrade gems at that point? Because the gems themselves don't matter. It's just like I don't know. It seems like just like there is like they are rushing, they are still sprinting for some reason, and like somehow they still
Patch
need to
ain't
sprint.
done.
Yeah,
Patch isn't done.
it's just, dude.
It's crazy to me. I don't know. I don't understand, honestly, how they took this long on this patch and it's so half baked.
Yeah,
I I I have to imagine like maybe this is me like just pinning it on the things that I don't like, but I have to imagine that the systems bloat under the hood is just biting them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
That's because they've introduced zones and things like that with such regularity that I can't imagine that Korthia is what took the time, right?
yeah,
And
no.
raids, again, I can't imagine that Sanctum is what like really set them behind. And maybe I'm sure there is some element of people still being work from home and stuff like that, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's a technology company. It's
Yeah.
like the ideal situation for doing stuff online because it's all already on the computer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, they've had a year. Like, no offense to everybody else, but like I've been remote for a year now too at my job, and like the first 6 months and even the first 9 months were awful trying to like learn how to do that, right? Like not going to the
Yeah,
office or not seeing people. And um like now it's like almost second nature. I feel like I work better. But yeah, I don't
yeah.
know.
I
It's
have heard. Oh, go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
No, we're gonna say?
I have heard some speculation that basically in the after WAD or while they were developing Legion, because they abandoned WAD, they ended up ahead of schedule, right? And so then during Legion, they were basically ahead the whole time. And so it's actually not a like Shadowlands problem. It's just they've been slowly losing ground over time. And like
Gotcha.
every patch has been slightly less done than the last one. And I don't know that that entirely holds water because 8.0 was pretty bad too. Like
Yes.
8.0 was not done. And 9.0 was significantly more polished than 8.0. But that is something that I've heard speculated about that like they've just been they've actually always been behind and it's just been covered up for a while by the fact that they had a huge head start from
Yeah.
abandoning WAD.
I mean, yeah, that could be the case. Plausible. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point it's just like we should expect a lot less from any patch announcement than what we're gonna get. So and in keeping with the tuning, so just to sort of push us a little bit forward, but in keeping with the tuning, they did also go back and add domination sockets to items that should have had them at the start, like
Yes.
leather boots with no
Yep.
domination sockets on it. Well, no one is going to pick up that item.
Yeah.
It's worthless. So in any event, that was I think the only final thing that they did this week is they did I guess another tuning pass on gear. Just made sure that gear that should have sockets on domination sockets on it has it across the board. So we speak about leather
Yeah,
here, but I
there
think
was
they did it.
one leather piece, which is the boots from the 9, and one plate piece, which is the gloves from the Terra Gru.
Yep.
They didn't have domination sockets that now do. I can confirm I got the plate gloves on my warrior this morning,
Oh, cool.
um, and they have a domination socket now. Um, so
So yeah, so now everything should hopefully work, and I can't wait to open up my mythic or my vault this week and get nothing but non-raid leather boots, and not be able to select because
nice.
they don't have
I
sockets on
also
them.
can't wait for us to find. I am. This is total speculation,
Yep.
but um, I can't wait for gear from the vault to not have domination sockets for some
Oh, that yep.
wacky reason.
That'll be interesting. I'm not opening my vault until like very late, like right before
Yeah,
raid,
like I don't
maybe.
read until Friday. I'm gonna open my vault after people have confirmed it's not broken as hell. Um, did you also see there was one more thing? It's not on our list. I meant to put it on there, but I forgot. Apparently, if you get loot mailed to you from Mythic Plus from the like end of dungeon cache, it isn't capped this week.
Oh, interesting. I did not see that.
Um, yep, I don't know if they've hotfixed that. I would assume that they had, but there is definitely a screenshot floating around of someone getting a 252 piece or like a 250 or not 250 236 piece or whatever it is from their mailbox.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Oh man, Blizzrad, what are you doing over there? Um, so cool. So cool. Yeah. So I mean, more socket tuning or shard tuning, which is a system I don't think we needed, but we got.
Hmm.
But I guess maybe on a more upbeat note. So I think we've been a little bit negative for the first part of this episode. Let's talk. I guess let's talk a little bit about the raid and at least on some of the fights. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to go first. I mean, I guess for me, my at least initial reaction to basically every fight. So I've killed everything on heroic, except Sylvanas. So everything
Right.
up through KT. Every fight's been fine.
Yeah.
I have zero
Yeah.
like, and maybe this changes with Mythic, but I have no like. Council of Blood type, like, hateful, moments, and even no, like, Stone Legion general moments, right, where, I think those were fights that were just bad in Castle Nathria. I've liked pretty much every fight in the instance.
Yeah. Uh I am so right now we are what, 6 of 10? 6 of 9, we'll say 6 of 9.
Yeah,
Because who's killing Sylvanas? Let's be honest.
fair.
Um and so we go back in tonight, should wrap up those last three. Uh yeah, I would generally agree. Even like Painsmith, I was dreading. Painsmith was actually like pretty fine. I was pleasantly surprised. There's a lot of personal responsibility, but it's actually very difficult for an individual to just wipe the group,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
what I had been concerned about. And it's tuned to the point that you have a bunch of people die, you can't kill the boss, which is fine. Like that's how it should be tuned. But because of how one-shotty it is, there are a lot of like you have to play very well in order
Oh,
to
yeah.
kill it. It's definitely a boss. I don't expect most pugs to be able to kill Painsmith.
Yeah,
Um,
no, no.
even a lot of guild groups I know were like struggling to kill Painsmith. Um, just from being around in other discords, like even guilds that typically do like late tier CE guilds struggling to kill Painsmith because it's very punishing.
Yeah,
Um, but it kind of occupies that Gorfiend spot, right? From like Gorfiend being the guild breaker in Hellfire Citadel.
yeah.
Um, not as bad as Gorfiend, from what I understand, but it does kind of occupy that spot where like you must be this tall to continue, and then Guardian and Fate Scribe are easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Painsmith for us was definitely the fight we wiped the most on this week. So I think we had something like 30 wipes to it. And a lot of it was a combination of like it was just people not understanding the spike mechanic, I think.
Yeah.
Like the graphic and being a little bit too playing a little bit too safe, I guess you could say.
Perks of
Um,
being a weekend team. I had so I went in our boss channel for it. I put like multiple clips of like here's how you step over the wave of spikes in phase 2 and phase 3 safely.
yeah.
And so like we had that covered. A lot of our wipes were just like losing 3 or 4 people over the first two phases,
Gotcha.
to things like the fire in phase in the intermission. That's very rippy.
Yes.
And then there is still a learning curve to the spikes, so people definitely still got hit by the spikes, and then melee getting hit by the balls, trying to damage them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we lost. I think most of our deaths were not even in phase two. We figured out pretty quickly, but
Mhm.
well, not pretty quickly. I mean, we still lose people, but most of them are to like bad trap drops and then not breaking the traps fast enough, actually, and then
Yep.
getting that wave and getting a double hit, a back to back hit, and just sort of dying to the damage. So when we started, we actually used. I don't know if it was limit or one of the guilds basically the strat where like anytime you have an overlap of traps plus well balls into traps plus tank mechanic. It's like the tank runs far into one side, and then the traps run through and basically follow the balls, the spike balls, back into the opposite corner. And once we started doing that, it was like I think we wiped maybe 2 or 3 times after that change, and then killed it. Right. So
Yeah, we basically, I think in pretty much every case, we just dropped the spikes in the like corner to the right of the entrance of the room,
okay,
and the tank spikes always went to the other corner, the opposite corner from that. And
gotcha.
there are definitely a couple times that like we had the balls rolling towards the entrance of the room, and someone dropped a spike on a trap on the side that they were rolling towards
Oh
instead of
god.
being on the correct side of it, and like exploded the raid. But I think we had 15 total pulls on it before we
Oh
got the
nice.
kill. So we did, I think, reasonably well on it, and
It's crushed.
I have high hopes for our raid tonight. Fate Scribe is honestly the one I am most concerned about because of how like one person not doing the ring mechanic correctly just wipes the raid.
Yeah. I will tell you, so we only had one wipe to the rings not completing in time.
Really? What were the
Uh,
rest of your wipes on Fate Scribe? Like
Um
damage?
just like people dropping bombs in bad spots or
Okay.
dying, yeah, dying to like the balls in in the intermission phases, like not basically realizing you can't get hit by them because they are, well, they're not one
They do
shots.
like
They are
30k damage on heroic.
they
Yeah,
basically they basically push you low enough that the other random room damage kills you.
will
So
probably kill you. Yeah,
yeah, so I mean, but we only had a handful of wipes. I think we had maybe like 5, 6, like 6-ish wipes to that one. And yeah, I mean, really only one was to like, and it was essentially someone who like called for someone to sit in their rune. No one came, so they just jumped on to try and move it. And by the time somebody got there, they were basically like halfway between where it needed to go and where it was, and they were like,
and
uh, yeah.
yeah,
So either
yeah.
way, it wasn't they weren't gonna make it. But no, I mean, it wasn't bad. It was actually kind of I kind of enjoyed it with like the tank mechanic and the bombs and stuff like that. So and then Guardian was just is like it's just
Guardian's pretty easy.
yeah, it's a patchwork fight, so
I
it's pretty
expected
simple.
it to be more of a DPS check than it actually is. It's kind of a
Yeah,
healing check.
yeah,
Um, but if you do two purging protocols in between every pillar, the DPS check is completely trivial. It's not that hard to heal that many purging protocols. Like nobody's getting one shot by that second purging on heroic. So
yep,
you can kind of just like hit a tranquility or a revival and
yep,
just kind of top the group up off of that second one um and be okay.
yeah,
And as long as you don't have people like die to the meltdown, then by die to the meltdown I mean stand in the meltdown.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's pretty manageable. So we have like two pulls on Guardian right now. I expect it to take us like another 3-4 maybe to get everybody comfortable with all the movement,
yeah.
and to not stand on the tanks during Sunder.
Yeah, yeah, we did the foot strap for ours, but yeah, I think we had it's funny. I
Yeah.
think we only had like 3 wipes to Guardian, and the first wipe was basically to the raid not moving from the beam because no one knew what it looked like. Even though we're sort of like, "Hey, move out of the
It's a
beam."
Zymox beam.
Yeah, yeah, people are just like, I don't know what to do," and died to that. So, yes, that was my
Mhm.
Guardian piece, so no, yeah, that was, Guardian wasn't bad. Seemed like a very like, on Mythic, I think it'll be a fun healer fight. Probably a 3 heal fight, depending on how tight the DPS check is, which will be fun.
I think it's
Um,
interesting because like I initially would have agreed with that, but because of the ability to like take extra purging protocols to make the fight longer, I could see it being a higher. I could see there being like two strats of like one's a low healer fight and you just push damage, and one's a high healer version and you just do more purging protocols.
yeah, that's true. I
Because
wonder
if you
though.
do like
Sorry.
if you do an extra purging protocol each time, you add about 12 seconds to the fight. Or I guess it's really you add about 8 seconds to the fight per pillar.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a fair amount of time. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the problem is taking that third hit if you have the cooldowns because
Yeah.
there's it's like slightly under 3 minutes the way we did it to the third pillar. So like
Mhm.
any cooldowns you use on the first pillar are like seconds off of being up for that third one. So
Yeah.
um, timing wise, I don't know if yeah, maybe you can get away with it, but no, I think that fight will be fun in terms of just a like pure deep like really you're right, more of a healing check. So it'll be fun for healers.
Yeah.
I-
I don't know, I'm curious to see how people do it because I think it
yeah.
could go. I think it could be a 3 heal fight like you suggested. I think it could also be like a 5 heal fight and people just like heal through more purging protocols.
Yeah, bring more cooldowns. That
Um,
makes sense. That makes sense. And then yeah, I think I mean since none of us have done Sylvan, I guess the only other endish boss, or I guess any of the earlier bosses that you thought were fun or worth a couple of quick
um,
comments.
Nerzul, I really like where that ended up.
Yeah,
They basically on heroic you do the kind of what we got on mythic PTR testing, where you bounce back and forth with the malevolences. That's a lot of fun. I
yeah,
really like where that fight ended up. Um, I'm looking forward to that fight on mythic. I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
yeah,
And yeah, I generally like I agree with you. The first nine are pretty good. I think we don't have enough time to really complain about Sylvanas properly. I
yeah.
think probably the most effective thing for us to do in complaining about Sylvanas is to actually to go to the lore corner and complain about Sylvanas.
We could do that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can jump hit. I guess the only other real quick before we jump there, I think the only other fight we haven't talked about was just KT. And
I haven't.
KT,
Yeah,
well, you haven't done it yet, but at least for me, it's got a couple of cool throwbacks to the original Nax fight in terms
yeah,
of the ads and stuff like that. And I think it'll be a good like penultimate boss at the end of the day. The whole split phylactery stuff I think is fun. Um, but yeah, KT was not a bad fight. A couple of sketchy healing moments, but
yeah.
I think
There is
other.
one element of RNG in that fight that I don't like, and that is where you get the frost zone drops
Yes.
in phase 3. Because if you get them on the edges of the room, just have so much more time than if you
Right.
get them in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
So that's kind of annoying. I know because we definitely had some RNG because I've cleared normal KT a couple times now from doing sales, and like the RNG on that is kind of obnoxious how it affects the enrage timer, but or the soft enrage, but it's yeah, I think it's a good fight. I don't the only fight I would say I am not looking forward to on Mythic is probably Fate Scribe and Sylvanas.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get behind that. I think Fate Scribe's gonna be annoying on Mythic because of the walls. Like, and the fact that you have to, like, pass runes off between people, that's gonna be there's so much individual coordination. It's gonna be a little bit of rough, but yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So, yeah, so more to come. I think maybe we'll spend a little bit more time next week talking about Sylvanas if you get to
Yeah,
kill it on Mythic or
I
Heroic, I
think
mean.
I expect, World First Guilds will be getting to Sylvanas on Wednesday something
Yeah.
next week. I don't think KT is going to be an SLG kind of wall. Um, so I would expect them to be on Sylvanas relatively early. But
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe KT is tuned extremely tightly and they just they have to spend a lot of time on KT.
Yeah.
Or Guardian. That could be a wall as well. Like,
Yeah, Guardian could be, like, really close, yeah, just damage and healing wise, so yeah.
yeah,
Well, we'll see. We'll
we
see.
will see.
All right, cool. Well, now we get into some of the more fun sections of the podcast. So we got the lore corner, and of course, so spoilers, we are going to be talking about the Sylvanas cinematic and like some of our
Yep.
thoughts around that. So the end of Sanctum of Domination, what happens at the end of the Sylvanas fight. So if you guys don't want to listen, you can tune us out for probably the next 10 minutes or so.
Yep.
And then we'll maybe wave our hands if you're watching live, or I know Emallson, you timestamps and stuff like that. So yeah, so I think we can skip over this part if you don't want spoilers. But yeah, so that cinematic,
Oh boy.
the end of Sylvana cinematic, which so I've watched. It's funny. I both watched the cinematic and sort of been annoyed. I've watched the drama on social media, been somewhat annoyed, and then I basically read like opposing viewpoints from like people who have like I wouldn't say enjoyed the cinematic, but like understand where the cinematic comes from, and those people who are just like upset with the way that the story is being told. And so just from a blanket lore perspective, then we can talk about maybe some of that controversy. What happens at the end is essentially at the end of the fight, which ends it Sylvanas' health at 50%, which is sort of an interesting percentage, which causes some issues. But it ends there, and basically what happens is the jailer gets strong enough over the course of that fight. We don't knock Sylvanas down fast enough, and the jailer is able to pull the orb out of the arbiter and basically plant it back into the hole in his chest, essentially becoming whole. So sort of the idea there is that essentially the arbiter or the jailer or Zoval potentially was the arbiter in a previous life before he was banished, and they took that power. The what are they called? The ancient ones or whoever took that
The
power from,
first ones,
or the first
the
ones, yeah.
relics of the first ones, yeah.
Yeah, took that power from him and then gave it to like this arbiter machine thing to do his job for him, right? And banished him to the mall. So he like gets the rune in his chest, gets his Lich King like armor sort of all stacked up. He literally looks like he has on the Helm of Domination. Um, and basically starts to say, "Hey, we're now going to go kill everyone," or basically not kill everyone, but basically make the world in a perfect place where everyone serves me as the jailer, right? Or Zoval. And it's I guess that point that Sylvanas says, "I've had enough of this," and fires an arrow directly at the jailer. He of
Not the
course,
worst line too.
yeah,
She says, "I will never serve," ignoring the fact that she's literally been serving the jailer for 4 expansions now or something.
yeah. Which there's a reason for that, and
Poor
so
choice of words. Poor
yeah,
choice of words.
yeah. So she fires the arrow. Jailer catches it, and then basically, um, like says, I'm done with you." Or Anduin and myself are leaving, and before he leaves, he basically breaks a soul shard, pulls a soul shard out of his little portal that he can create, and basically gives Sylvanas back the portion of her soul, assuming the portion of her soul that was stolen when she was stabbed with Frostmourne. And then she passes out, and us as the heroes and the other lore characters sort of walk over to her, and she's like passed out on the thing. and then the jailer and Anduin go through the portal that is created to what many people are assuming is the jailer's Covenant homeworld, the Sepulchre or something like that. Um, so that is
Which we know
basically
very little
what
about.
happens. Yeah, so we know a little bit about that. So that's basically the story at the end of the day. Like, so the key points are the jailer has gone through, presumably back to his Covenant homeworld, very much like Bastion or Maldraxxus, his Covenant homeworld. He has taken Anduin with him. Anduin's still a little mini Lich King dude. And Sylvanas has her full soul back now for the first time since it was stolen from her by, assuming, the Lich King, right? Um, Sorry. Oh, bug just flew in my mouth. God. Oh my God. That was weird. Uh, phew. I lost my train of thought now.
Something Anduin Lich
Oh yeah,
King.
Anduin, little mini Lich King, and then the here like or sorry, Sylvanas' soul is now full again, and now she gets to be judged by everybody else. So that is sort of where the lore ended up. Oh, Anduin does, sorry, right at the end drop his compass, which is the compass his dad gave him, or was his dad's compass, which is the compass that Sylvanas gave Anduin after the opening Legion cinematic, I believe is how that got back into his hands. So and even a lot to unpack there in terms of lore. And I've watched basically both sides of the story. So like to your point where like she says a line, I'm not gonna serve anyone, or I'm done serving or whatever. People were a little bit upset about the fact that she gets some sort of quote unquote redemption arc
Yeah.
um through all of this. And I've basically watched and read things from both points of view, right? So there's the point of view where like and specifically this was the Taliesin video where he goes through and basically says like all of this was foretold. All you had to do was pay attention. And he goes through and he does a very good job. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent for if you sort of agree with him. Goes through sort of all the different lore pointers or sorry, story pointers over the past couple of expansions around why Sylvanas' choices make sense up to this point. And sort of the points he makes is that like ultimately she was utilizing the jailer as like a means to the end, and sort of the idea that you know the jailer wasn't going to be the Lich King 2.0, like he was going to make the world better. We're going to get rid of life and death, and just everything will be good, right? At the end of this, and she sort of believed that all the way up until basically that point where she realized, hey, his master plan is not to put the world back, but to basically control it, I guess is sort of the point there.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a suspension of reality because I guess the issue is that they do a bad job, and this is I think a storytelling thing. Blizzard does a bad job of like saying this is what Sylvanas knows, and this is what the player
The
knows.
player knows.
And
Yeah.
like from a player's perspective, we've seen the Denathrius cinematics, like where Denathrius knows probably what the plan is. He's very particular about, hey, I need all this anima and these souls because we're going to take over
Yeah.
everything, right? And he's very much on the same page. So we assume that everybody connected with the jailer is on that same page. And we don't see a lot of the jailer and Sylvanas interactions. Um,
Yeah.
and
I do
so,
think like it's a real stretch to me to say that she actually like you've got the giant god of death with a hole in his chest that rules over Giga Hell.
yeah,
And I have a very difficult time believing that, you know, anyone with a modicum of experience in the world, just like understanding that people will lie for power, why would you ever believe the jailer?
yeah,
That's like, uh, Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner, former, like, literally general of the High Elf armies, is going to believe the jailer when he says, "Oh yeah, we're definitely getting rid of life and death, and everything's going to be peachy, and I'm definitely not going to use all this power to become God King of the universe or anything like that." No, of course
yeah,
not. That's where that explanation really breaks down for me. Is it's like it requires you to assume that Sylvanas is dumb, basically. Like Sylvanas
right,
has to be stupid and gullible to believe the jailer. Which, okay, if you want to say Sylvanas is stupid and gullible, that's out of character with how she had been developed as like this master strategist, like playing the long game kind of thing over the past several expansions. So
right,
there's that inconsistency. I just I have not yet heard an explanation for this story that resolves all the inconsistencies. Like every different explanation I've heard, like that one has that inconsistency.
Right.
There's other explanations for why this makes sense that just have, other different inconsistencies. It's just like, mm,
Yeah, and I think the other thing too that sort of bothers me, so the inconsistencies are one thing, but the other problem is that for me to like piece all this together to kind of make sense in my head, I had to go to like external sources, right? And like
right.
the story itself, and I think Blizzard, for whatever reason, the way that they write a lot of this stuff is everything's a cliffhanger. The next thing.
Yeah.
So it's very much a like
Yeah.
it's very much like everything has something hidden in it. So now I don't spend time in the moment of what's happening. I spend time being like, all right, well, did we foretell this like 4 cinematics ago? Like, do I need to go back and rewatch them? Like, now that I'm watching this cinematic, I'm not really watching. I don't really care what happens to Sylvanas or the chains or anything like that. What I really want to know is like, where are the pointers to say where we're going next? Like, where, you know what I mean? And it's less about living in the moment about what's happening and more about trying to say like, where are all the little secret pointers or tells or foreshadowing that Blizzard has built into these things, right? And
Yeah.
like going back all the way back to like Il'gynoth and like the whispers there, or like you know
Right.
what I mean, like things like that. And I think that's sort of the problem that I have is like there's not and I think PC Gamer put out an article on this where they were like, there's not a lot of present story. There's a lot of
Yeah.
like pointing backwards and pointing forwards, but there's not a lot of story in the present. And maybe I'm getting their explanation wrong, but that's how I took it. It was like,
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of taking that. And I do think it's a valid critique.
yeah,
Like, not to like do another Final Fantasy contrast, but in Final Fantasy, the story is self-contained. Like there's no books or anything like that. Final Fantasy 14, you do the main story quest, it tells you the story.
yeah,
Like very straightforward. And the Final Fantasy story, like if you've ever played the Final Fantasy game, you know some of the stuff is like fucking weird,
yeah.
man. Uh, there's like one of the expansions you like end up fighting basically the Catholic Church, but they've got giant chess monsters. It's very strange. Um, but they do tell you the story, and they do tell the player things that the rest of the party doesn't get to know, or like the rest of the group, the NPCs don't get to know about the enemy's motivations, right? Like you do get cutscenes where, like, kind of where we had the Sylvanas and Anduin cutscene earlier this expansion, where that's not something that like Thrall and Jaina saw. That's something that we, the player, get to see that they don't. But it's not just like ooh spooky, It's like, oh, here's what the big bad's motivations are,
Right, yeah.
helping us understand what's going on so that we can get invested in stopping it, as opposed to like prior to you telling me what the jailer's motivation was right now, I had no idea what the jailer's motivation was. Like, are they trying to end life and death? I mean, I guess that makes sense with what Sylvanas experienced after the end of Wrath of the Lich King.
Right.
But I had honestly just assumed that, you know, she was doing this basically to not end up in the maw herself out of like very selfish reasons, not like any virtuous, like, oh, we're going to end, life
No,
and death.
no, it's very yeah. Yeah, and it's very weird too. It's very sort of yeah. That part of the story I think doesn't come out if you just do the stuff in game. Like I think you have to read outside of it, which is cool to an extent, but there's never I think the problem is that Blizzard writes it with the expectation that you've read everything outside of the game, or at
Yeah.
least experience everything outside of the game, so that a lot of things in game don't they can tie together, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a very strange choice with how they made, like, you have the main story quest in WoW now, the campaign quest for Shadowlands. And it's very strange to me looking back on it now with all the story stuff since, and seeing how little actually got explained in the Shadowlands campaign quests.
Yeah,
Like, that's something that I think part of the reason the Final Fantasy main story quest works is that they are actually telling a story, and it's not like any gonna win any, literary awards or anything like that. But it's a competent story. It gets you invested in the characters and the problems that are happening.
right, right,
And it's very much actually a story. And if there's not a lot of like kill quests and stuff that you have to do, as opposed to the I'm not to say there's none, there's definitely some, but there's not a huge amount of them. As opposed to WoW, where like my recollection of the campaign quest in WoW is like majority kill quests and some exposition, or not exposition, but like showing off the different Covenant zones, not really setting up the grander story.
Right. Yeah. 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 So I mean, it is what it is. I think with the cinematic. To be fair, like now that I've watched a lot of this stuff and actually read a bunch of it, I am slightly more invested in the story. Not and I think now it's more of like, oh, I get to be like, when I see the next part of it, I'll get to be like, yes, this is the thing last year, like last two cinematics that they talked about. I'm on the same page now for that half second that matters in the next cinematic, right? Or the next
Right.
story beat. And then it's always like, all right, what am I looking towards next, right? So it's sort of just so I can be a part of the club and like watch something and be like, oh yeah, the helmet that the
Right.
jailer had on has the same gem that Helm of Domination has. Does that mean he's being controlled by something, right? Or like the way that the pedestal he was standing on when he went through the portal was the one that was all scratched out in Oribos, which you realize is actually his covenant like portal and symbol. And that's when he went through the portal, which is why you think they're going back to his covenant, homeland or whatever. So like not picking that up the first time and having to sort of tick and tie it together, or like it being explicitly told, is sort of sucks. But now that I've sort of a little bit more invested, I get that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just maybe I'm expecting a little bit more straightforward in terms of the narrative, right? In terms of like, hey, just tell me
Yeah.
sometimes where they're being sneaky or this is supposed to happen or why this is happening.
I think honestly, I think a lot of the issue is just how the story gets told
Yeah,
still. And it's been a complaint that people have had for a long time. And I think this is just the most visible example of it going wrong.
yeah,
Where, like, in WoD, I know there's a lot of complaining about why is Garrosh here?
yeah,
Like, why is Garrosh in Alt Draenor? Why does Thrall kill Garrosh in Alt Draenor?
yeah,
Um, because all of that happened off screen in the book, right? And if you read the book, then you knew all the answers. And if you did Negrand, you got like part of the answers.
right.
But other than that, like you had to go read the book. And they did a lot better actually in Legion. Legion was very clear from just the in-game stuff what was going on.
Hmm.
And BFA kind of was, but also kind of was a mess anyway, narratively.
Yeah,
And then Shadowlands again, it's just like Sylvanas is completely inscrutable if you haven't been like making notes of all the different stuff that's going on. I think that the Taliesin explanation is probably the best one that I've heard
yeah,
for like her motivations, because all it requires you to assume is that Sylvanas is kind of dumb, which is,
yeah. Or I mean, dumb or so focused on a singular thing that she
yeah, blinded
puts.
by her own
Yeah,
goals. Yeah, that
that might
I
be.
think that's the best explanation,
Yeah,
but it's still bad.
yeah. It's still like, yeah, yeah. So in any event, that's the cinematic. I think to the point to the only good point I think, and this comes from the Taliesin video, is that we are not in a who is Nazoth type situation that we were in 8.3, right? When he was
Right.
when they were the last boss of that instance, we now know like 8.2, we are going after the jailer somewhere outside of where we've been before, and we
Right.
hopefully are bringing the fight to them. Like that, cool, on board, very clear, right? And it sounds like eventually we probably need to save Anduin along the way, right? Or
Yeah.
and Anduin's willing to be saved. So I think in terms of like setting up next, cool, but like how we got here,
I
I don't
think it's
know.
honestly just pretty unfulfilling as well as part of the Sylvanas encounter, where
Yeah.
like we spend 15 minutes on normal, okay? 15 minutes getting Sylvanas to half health, failing because the jailer still gets the Arbiter's Sigil,
Yep.
and then Sylvanas actually, fun fact, after the cutscene, she has zero health.
Oh yeah, she's just. I think if you mouse, I don't know if I think she
I
says
think
she's
she's listed as
deceased.
level question mark unconscious.
Oh yeah, gotcha. I thought it said deceased. Somebody was saying that, but yeah, just ugh, gross.
But it's like, so there's this thing in storytelling that you don't want your protagonist, like you don't want, like it's fine for a protagonist kind of thing to fail, but it really sucks when it feels like, in at least in games, I think, when you could have just done nothing and it would have had the same result, which is what this is. Like we could just not fight Sylvanas and everything would happen the same.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I guess the
And
only difference would be we didn't fight her. She doesn't realize the jailer's doing what he's doing until he already has ultimate power, but then she just helps us anyway, right?
yeah, like I don't see
Yeah.
how we actually do anything. Like it's not even like people were annoyed back in Cataclysm when Thrall, you know, went and killed Deathwing
Yeah.
in the cutscene. This is just like 1,000 times worse because
Not fighter. And yeah. He'll
we could
eventually
just
figure it
not do the
out.
fight. It's not even like in Cataclysm, like, oh, we bought Thrall time so he could charge his lasers and finish it. This is just like, why are we even doing this? And it doesn't help that Sylvanas not a great fight.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Not a great fight.
Yeah. That is true. So yeah. In any event, that's I think I don't know unless you have any topics. I think lore wise, it's iffy. It's on shaky ground. I think I see what they were trying to do. I don't think. I mean, to be fair, like the other side of this is that a bunch of the writers and stuff got like death threats, and like people are really upset about it. Which I don't.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
It's just met like there. It's a game.
It's
It's a
just a video
story.
game,
Yeah.
guys.
I think hopefully the people that listen here are on level headedness there, but it's just like
Yeah.
there's no reason for that. Like you can be
Like
a
I
little bit
think this
upset, but
story is dumb, and I am not afraid to say I think this plot beat is really bad. But like the level of hostility, that level of hostility of like sending people threats, not even like death threats are like another level, but like being hostile to the writers, like sometimes people do things badly that are otherwise competent and good people. Like
yeah.
not everyone is firing on all cylinders on every line of text they write.
Oh yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. So it just seems like
It's like it's okay to be critical. It's not okay to be hostile.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. But yeah, that was the other side of this where like people were just like very, very angry. Um, which yeah, which just seems a little weird to me. But in any event, that is the lore corner. And unfortunately, I know there's one question I really want to spend some time on, and I
I think
unfortunately,
we just save it for next week
yeah, we can
at this
save our
point.
Q&A. Yeah, we can save our Q&As for next week, but
Unfortunately, we did have those technical difficulties, which cost us like 30 minutes of the show.
yeah,
Uh, so we are running behind, and we will. Sorry, Kate, your question is getting saved for next week.
we still have it though, Kate. I didn't delete it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
it's
delete
still in the
Abe's
list.
question 100%, but I'm not deleting
Oh,
yours.
oh, we can actually answer that one real quick. Are birds real, or
Yes,
are they government drone?
no, they're real. What do you? So is this some Zoomer crap that I don't like? I don't know about?
It's a joke. It's a meme. It's a conspiracy. I think I thought it was a lot funnier before QAnon,
Yeah.
but
Now you're like, people actually believe this. Oh
yeah,
no.
yeah.
Interesting.
So I think it's lost a little bit of the humor, but yeah, it's a joke.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah. That is going to be our show for this week. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties. There will be a YouTube version that is stitched together from the streams today, and the audio version, of course, will be up as well. And yeah, those should be up within the next couple of days. It might be a little bit delayed because I've got WoW stuff to do. I'm still catching up on editing the Soulbind stuff for Brewmasters, so it might be Tuesday before stuff goes up this week. But um, that is it for our show today. Thank you all for coming in and hanging out and listening. And Abe posting no birds in chat. I just now understood exactly what that was referencing. He's got like a parrot and an X in
Oh,
in
weird. It's
chat.
so weird.
But thank you all for listening. If you'd like to support the Peak of Serenity, the work we do on guides, this podcast, all of the stuff that we do, you can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/slash Peak of Serenity. And of course, you are always welcome to come and join the Discord and hang out in the different lounge channels that we got for each spec. I heard that the Mistweaver Lounge has been an interesting time in the past couple of weeks.
Been fun.
It's been fun. It's been
Well,
fun. It's a good place.
yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And uh I don't know. We had Pearl leaking some like extremely good Sylvanas strats in Brew Lounge this week. Definitely want to check that out.
God.
But that's it for the show today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.